Welcome to Ordinary Teachers and Students, where we get to hear teachers and students tell us their extraordinary stories. My hope is that through this podcast, ordinary teachers from around the world can relate to the stories they hear and get some timely suggestions and ideas. My name is Alan Cheng, and I'm a life coach as well as a university lecturer. My vision is to make life coaching a part of every school. Hello, I'm delighted to now welcome our first guest, Winnie Chow. So Winnie is the current head of English in a secondary school in Hong Kong. I worked with Winnie for 12 years when I was teaching in Hong Kong, and I can say this, she is one of the most extraordinary teachers I've ever met. I've had the pleasure of seeing her teach on a number of occasions, and she's just like a magician in the classroom. With a wave of her wand, her spellbound students engage in everything that she asks them to do. So I often sat in her classroom thinking, I wish I could teach like that. So we have so much we can learn from her. So I'm super excited to get started. So hi, Winnie.
Hello, Alan. Thank
So
you. The introduction, I feel flattered.
do you want to maybe tell us a little bit more about yourself? Anything else that I didn't say that you want people to know?
Okay, I'm an English teacher in a local secondary school. I have been working in the same school for 13 years. This is my 14th year.
Wow.
I think I'm still very passionate about teaching.
Yeah. So what got you started teaching in the first place? Was it something you always wanted to do?
It's very interesting. It's a long story. So, like
We love
many
long
of the
stories.
others, like many of the other teachers, I thought of joining the teaching profession when I was young.
Mm.
But interestingly, it turned out that my teaching uh, practice experience wasn't that pleasant.
Mm.
One of the placement schools that I went to was actually my own secondary school. I
Okay.
thought that it would be a piece of cake because I would be meeting the schoolmates in my own secondary school. I understood the culture, so everything should be easy. But then I found that because of a lack of experience, I didn't really enjoy it that much. I couldn't engage the students, and I found that I was just spoon feeding them all the time. And I found that every time when my supervising teachers came to my class, or when the supervisors in university came to my class, it was more like a performance, like a show. And I knew that from the bottom of my heart that it was something that I could never do in reality because I spent so much time crafting the materials, putting on a show. But I know that as a teacher, when you got so many classes, it's impossible for you to do so.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So were you thinking about giving up then?
Yes. So towards the end of my teaching practicum, a lot of my classmates were sending resumes to many schools, but actually, probably I was the only one who wasn't taking any actions. So I did not really look for any of the schools during that time. I still remember I was celebrating the last day of my teaching experience in a party. But suddenly I received an email from my lecturer in university asking me to go to join an interview in a secondary school. I knew nothing about that school and I wasn't too keen to do that. But because
Wow.
there came an opportunity, I thought, okay, maybe I should give it a try. So on the following day, I went to the school. I wasn't well prepared at all. And uh, when the principal asked me what I knew about that school, I only answered, it's a co-ed school. That's it. And I was very honest that I did no preparation because I just received the email a day before. But probably because I was not nervous, so I performed well. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So
So
that's why
if
I
you,
was lucky to
yeah,
get a job. Yeah.
right. So if you're an early
Mm.
career teacher listening to this, that's not the way to prepare for job interviews.
You are
But
right. You are right.
but does that mean that you were still a bit hesitant even going into that job interview whether you wanted to teach?
Yes, I think that's the right way to say. But I'm a person who likes following the flow, going with the flow. So
Mm,
if the opportunity comes, then I will just take it and see how it goes.
right, right. Okay.
Mm-mm,
So I guess
mm.
the next question to ask you is really what's made you stay? So just now you said 13 years. That's quite a long time, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I think yeah, at first uh, also to be honest, I wasn't too enthusiastic about my job. And I
Mm,
just wanted to try and gave it a try and see how it go. But then we were very lucky because we had a consultant coming to our
mm,
department
mm,
to bring his own special school-based curriculum to our school.
mm, mm,
And during that time, I found that uh, I really experienced the magic of engaging the students
mm,
myself for a couple
mm.
of times. And I found that that was the experience that I had never experienced before. That's
Yeah.
why I just found that I fell in love with that. I
Mm,
love the curriculum more. I got more satisfaction. And yeah, until now, I still love it. And it has been
mm.
13 years.
So you actually found joy in the teaching, right? You found ways to engage the students and you felt like you could teach properly.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
Mm.
We're going to try to get him, that consultant. So obviously I know him. We'll get him onto this podcast as well. So thank you for the introduction. I mean, for the main part of the podcast, basically, I wanted to invite our guests to like pick one area of teaching that they're really passionate about or really fascinated about to dive a bit deeper into. So Winnie, was there a particular area that you wanted to talk about?
Mm, maybe we can talk about how to engage students,
Yeah,
how to
go for it.
motivate the students through
Yeah.
student-centered approaches.
Yeah, I think so many
Mm,
teachers want to hear about that because that's the most difficult part, I would say, particularly at the start of your career when you're not you have so many things going on in your mind, right? You need to plan a good lesson, you want to make sure you can manage the students well, but then engagements feels like, oh, it's a bonus. It's great if I can engage them, but I'll be okay, like I'll be doing well if I can just survive the lesson, right? So
mm, mm.
like what do you do to engage the students? What do you say?
Mm, different authentic activities and different games. For example,
Mm,
um, let's let me use one of the strategies that I have used in class
yeah,
before.
yeah, sure, sure.
Let's say I wanted the students uh, to write to do something related to the DSE, which is a public examination in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So usually to many students, this is one of the most tedious things in
Mm,
class because they
mm,
have to start writing and they have
mm,
no ideas for that. So what I asked them to start with was I just gave them a piece of paper and asked them
mm,
to imagine if they were to advertise their own dog walking service for their neighbor, what would
mm,
it be?
mm.
So the students, I didn't give them any guidelines. I didn't even tell them what they should include in their own flyer, but
Okay.
they were discussing because they knew that they needed to um, win. They needed to get their classmates to vote for the best flyer in
Mm,
class.
mm,
So they were thinking about how to make it as authentic as possible. So they included
mm.
information like um, dates,
Yeah,
days that are available that they
yeah.
could provide a service, time, and also how they're going to charge the service, the activities they're going to
Mm,
include, some discounts,
yeah,
etc. So when they made it authentic, um, they actually were thinking about brainstorming the
yeah.
content they need for their actual
Mm,
writing products in the end. So the
mm,
students were doing their own advertisement in
yeah.
class, and then we voted for the best one. Then I just showed them the writing later, and I said, "That's what I actually want you to do." And they found that, oh, they got the
Um,
idea. And when I
right, right.
marked their writing, I found that their idea was more detailed
Mm,
because they went through the whole planning process already with their
mm,
friends.
mm. That's
Mm,
really fascinating. So one word that I heard you say quite a few times was authentic, right?
mm,
Um,
mm.
I mean, I've lived in Hong Kong for a number of years, and obviously, I know that Hong Kong is a place where it's not quite common for people to walk their dogs. Like, so not many people have dogs, right? So, how
Yes.
did you make that part authentic? Because obviously, it sounds quite a difficult thing when it's not a, it's not common for people to have dogs in Hong Kong, really, right?
Mm, you are right. Um, But actually, a lot of students, when I asked about the experience,
Mm.
many students told me that they loved dogs.
Oh, they
So
love
even
dogs.
though
Okay.
yeah,
Mm,
they
mm.
love dogs. So even though they did not really have their own pets or they had never got the experience, uh, they got their own imagination. So they could
Yeah.
imagine how
Yeah.
they would feel if they had their dog and they couldn't walk their dog. How would they feel? Yeah.
And that's really important, right? Kind of knowing and asking about their experiences first before you kind of start the activity.
Exactly. So we started with, I call it the speed dating activity, where the
Oh,
students
yeah.
were sitting with their one of their classmates
Yep.
in class, and they were sharing the experience, like whether they liked dogs, whether they would like to
Mm,
keep a
mm.
pet, and how they would feel if they got a pet and they couldn't walk their dog. So they got a lot of sharing, think, pair,
Yep.
share at the
Yep.
beginning for the speed dating activities. And
Mm,
every
mm.
time after each question, I required them to get a new partner so they could
Right,
share
right.
with as
Yeah.
many people as possible before going to the
Yeah, yeah.
actual planning task.
Yeah, I can actually, as you talk about it, I can visualize it happening in your classroom. I can just imagine and feel the energy within that activity, kind of the speed dating activity to get them to talk about dog walking and different questions that you have about dogs. Is that something that you want
Mm.
to generate, like energy into the classroom?
Yeah, of course, of course. I love the class being very noisy,
Mm,
being very active. I
mm,
like students sharing ideas. So I always think that is the most important thing to start a class is to get that energy to engage the
yeah,
students before
yeah,
talking about other things.
yeah, absolutely. And another thing I thought about when you were talking about the activity just now was that it feels like you have helped the weaker learners generate ideas, right? Because you mentioned that you this activity is all for the writing later. And when they really got down to the writing, I would assume that all the students in your class, when they saw the writing, they will think, oh, I already have all the ideas here, so I can get started.
Mm,
Because
mm,
personally, I feel a lot of students, particularly the weaker ones, they get really stumped by starting. Like they feel like, oh, it's such a big effort to start writing, and therefore
mm,
it seems like your activities help them to really reduce that, right?
yeah, you're right. And even for some of the useful sentence patterns like rhetorical questions, for
Yeah,
example,
yeah.
when you want to teach the students and want them to put in their poster,
Mm,
put it in the flyer, it's not natural enough because
mm,
it seems that you're forcing the students to use the particular patterns that you
right.
want. But if you want them to design their own products, their own flyer, their own poster, it was just automatic because they wanted to use the best way to attract the audience.
Mm. Why do you think it's so important to make it authentic, like the task?
Mm. Uh, if it is not authentic, they don't find the meaning and they don't
Mm,
want to continue the task.
yeah,
And also they cannot use their own personal experience while producing the task that you want. So that's why I
yeah.
think making it authentic is very important.
Right, right. So I do understand that in Hong Kong, it's quite exam driven. So obviously you have to prepare students for the public exam. Um, how do you feel about that balance between making authentic activities for students to do in the classroom that engages them, but at the same time preparing them for the exam?
Uh, to me, if to me, it's always 50-50%. To me,
Mm,
always making it as authentic as possible is more like the lead in, the
mm,
pre-task, preparing students for the DSE drilling
mm,
practice. Yeah,
mm.
so I don't agree with the fact that the students will succeed if they can finish all the past papers. I just think
Mm.
that if you do it with quality if you only focus on several past papers, but
Mm,
each time they really go deep into the topic, they understand the topic very well. You give them feedback, they absorb it, then they can
mm,
perform better in the public exam.
That means that you still do exam paper practice with them, but you don't overly do it so that it's just about exam papers, right?
Yes.
Right, right. Fascinating. That's brilliant. Anything else that you wanted to add about how to engage students?
Mm, I think from time to time, adding some active activities in class,
Active activities, right?
activities in class is essential.
Mm, mm,
Let's say, for example, just as simple as getting the students to stand up, everybody just stand up, ask each of them one question,
yep,
and then they can sit down. Or it can be during the recap, when
yeah.
you ask them to share what they learned in the previous lesson.
Mm-hmm,
Or it can be just a quick discussion before they share their ideas. I think all this is very important because we were students before. And imagine if
mm,
you
mm.
need to sit there uh, for a long time listening to a teacher is a torture, and you
Yeah,
and
right,
nothing
right.
gets into your head.
Yeah, and I must say you are quite the master of moving students around the classroom. Do you want to
Thank
tell
you.
us maybe one more thing? How do you do that? Because every time I go into your classroom, you will almost certainly have some activities that get them to move around the classroom.
How do I do that? I think I'm a fun-loving person.
Mm, she
I
is
like standing
absolutely.
out
She
and
likes having fun.
yeah, I like standing out and having fun. So I just no, I just when I plan my lessons, I just think about, oh, one thing that I want the students to do to stand out and just to be active during the lesson, then I would just add
Mm.
it. And it's just very automatic and natural.
Yeah, but do you worry?
Mm.
Like, obviously, again, I'm trying to think from a new teacher's perspective. Do you worry that it gets out of control? So imagine students moving or running around the classroom, and the teacher is not really controlling them very well. It could turn into chaos quite quickly, right?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Particularly when you have a bigger class size,
Mm,
is it requires a lot of careful planning. Now in my senior forms, I have a lot of students in class
yeah,
30.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
also find it challenging because not all the students can follow the instructions that easily.
Mm,
But I
mm,
think practice makes perfect. You have to practice all
mm.
the time. It's impossible to be successful at the beginning, and you have to
Yeah.
keep practicing. And when the students violate the rule, I think this comes a good opportunity for education. And you will just tell the class how you feel
Mm,
about that,
mm,
and
mm,
what they
mm,
should do. Yeah. And I always think that the reason why it turns out to be chaos is because the instructions are not clear enough.
mm,
So
mm,
the students don't know what to do and they just stand up and wander around in classroom.
mm. So having very clear instructions and also practicing a few times like the activity, so you don't give up after the first time that it kind of doesn't work. Then I think that's seems like the key to having more of these kind of active activities in the classroom, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that, Winnie. So are you ready to move on to the quick fire questions? So for the quick fire questions,
Sure.
basically, I will just ask you a series of questions, and you can just answer it with a word or a sentence or a few words or sentences. Just try to be as concise as you can. Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Right. The first one is, how would students describe you?
Humorous.
How about colleagues?
Conscientious.
Okay. And what's your favorite go-to activity in the classroom?
Pictionary and charades.
Pictionary and charades. Okay. Okay. And how about online tools or resources? Are there any that you quite frequently go to?
Uh, the first one is Wheel of Names.
Oh, yeah, to pick people to answer questions,
Yes.
right? Okay. Yeah,
Yes.
I use that quite a lot
This
too.
the second one is Mentimeter.
Mentimeter. Okay. Yeah.
A platform that you get the students to share their ideas without making everybody speak, so they can just type their ideas there.
Is it still free of charge, or is it like there's a basic plan for it, right?
Their basic one, yes.
Okay, great. And then can you share maybe one funny or strange or scary, touching moment that's happened in the classroom?
Uh, when I was in my third year of teaching, once I went into my own classroom, I found that many chairs were broken into two parts. And also, the students dug a hole in the middle of the classroom, and they were afraid that I
Oh,
would find out and I would shout at them. So they used cardboards to cover it. And I asked them why. They said it's about feng shui.
okay. And so, hmm, how did you react then? So you went into the classroom and you saw all this, and what happened
Yes.
next?
So of course I because of a lack of experience, I just shouted at them and asked them to clear the classroom. But now,
Mm,
ref because now I'm more experienced, and I think after reflecting on the whole experience,
mm,
maybe I would just do something fun with them together to make them learn.
mm. So to educate them rather than to just simply shout at them,
Just
right?
shout at them, yeah, because
Mm,
they
mm,
couldn't
mm,
learn.
sure, sure. Brilliant, thank you. And maybe one last question was, do you have any questions for me? Because obviously on the podcast, I'm the one asking you questions, but I wonder whether you have any questions for me.
Of course, Alan, I know that you have done so many things. Um, how could you manage your time? I always wonder.
How do I manage my time? Oh, that's a big question. I see it more as managing my energy. So I am a morning person. So as people who know me will know, I wake up quite early in the morning. So today is a Saturday, so we're recording this on the Saturday. And actually, I still wake up at about 5-ish on
Wow.
Saturdays and Sundays. And the reason I say I manage my energy is because I'm very much a morning person. So I try to do as much as I can in the morning when my energy is high. And I work very little after 5 or 6 o'clock. Yeah, basically
Mm.
the evenings for relaxing, maybe playing with my daughter. Right now she's not here in
Mm.
England, but yeah, yeah. So I think managing your energy and like knowing when you are most productive is very important. And another thing I do is something I call eating the frog. So I read it from the internet. Basically, a frog is your most tedious, most complex, or a task that you don't want to do, right? But you still have to do
Mm.
it. So I eat the frog by doing it first. I get it out of the way.
Mm.
And so you kind
Mm.
of feel much better after doing that. If you get that really difficult task out of the way, I think you just feel so much better and you feel like, oh, I'm ready to tackle other tasks which are probably simpler in for the rest of the day.
Mm.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm still amazed by your time management skills.
Thank you, Winnie. If I move on to my very last question for you. So obviously the reason I made this podcast is to hopefully give some ideas to teachers, particularly the early career ones where they're just starting, possibly maybe even still in a program at university, like training to become teachers. So I wanted to ask you one last question, which was for you to just imagine yourself back in the day. So many, many years ago now for you. Um, so what advice would you give to that Winnie now that you've had all the experiences that you've had in the past 13 years? Yeah. What advice would you
Mm,
give to that fresh graduate Winnie?
yeah, that's one word that our consultant likes using when he was teaching us. That is show not tell. So
Mm,
teachers should speak less in class, should talk less, and most of the time should be given to students to showcase their learning.
mm. It's a great piece of advice, but I must challenge that by saying it's very difficult. I mean, of course I know the concept behind it, but how can you speak less and get the students to speak more in your class?
Like I said, if you can think of an authentic activities that are
Mm,
connected to their own life, and just give them some input, maybe some reading materials, some listening materials. Actually, you don't need to explain everything, and you don't have to worry about what the students are going to produce because they are going to learn. Uh, they will get there by your input, by your
mm,
feedback. Yeah. So
mm,
don't
mm,
worry too much about covering everything that you want to.
mm. I think that's a really, really good piece of advice too, right?
Mm,
Not
mm.
not thinking that I must cover all the things that I need to finish and being comfortable with doing that, right?
Yeah, because even though you have taught it, doesn't mean that students can learn it. This is my belief.
Yeah, thank you so much, Winnie. And I must say, I'm so grateful to the lecturer who handpicked you to go to that interview, because if it weren't for him, we never know what might have happened, right? We might have lost one of the best teachers that there possibly is in on this planet, to inspire lives and to teach so many students. Um,
Thanks for your kind words.
yeah, so thank you so much for joining us again, Winnie, and maybe I might
Thank
invite you
you.
back again for another conversation in the future.
Thank you so much, Alan. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. From the conversation with Winnie, I would say I really admire her ability to turn very dry and boring materials like exam papers into fun and authentic activities that engage her students. She encourages the creativity of her students by being very creative herself, and she injects energy into her lessons by doing lots of different activities that might require movement. So I guess the thing to really take away about engagement is that it's not about one game or task. It's more about the whole experience that you offer to the students. So I hope you enjoyed listening to Winnie's extraordinary story, and please do join us again next time on Ordinary Teachers and Students.